Turn on the recording. Okay, so now you all have to be on your best behavior. This meeting is being recorded. Thank you for joining us. Thank you, as always, to Miriam Friedman for organizing. And you all should really know, if Miriam Friedman wouldn't stay on me, I think we only would have scheduled 2 or 3 of these so far. So really, so thank you very much to Miriam. We actually would have scheduled none because it was her idea to begin with, but she didn't only come up with the idea. She has to keep on, you know, helping me along. So I appreciate the help very much. Thank you to all the people who submitted questions. There actually, there weren't as many questions this time. There definitely were questions. So with your indulgence, I'll probably elaborate a little more on the underlying concepts, but I do hope and expect that there'll be some questions charged through these questions, and we'll kind of go from there. Okay, let's just lay down some general groundwork for the situation of a Jewish person being in the hospital over Shabbos. It's obviously something we never hope for, but we certainly know that it definitely happens. A few important general principles. If a person is a chola, now a chola we translate as being an ill person. Okay, if a person is a chola, even if they're not in a life and death situation, if they're just not well, and there's halachic determination as to what's called not being well, but it's pretty fair to say that if they're in a hospital bed, they're not well. Because if they were well, the insurance company wouldn't pay for the extra day. I think we all know that by now. So it's fair to call that person a chola. The rule is that for the sake of the care of the chola, one is allowed to explicitly ask a non-Jew to do malacha, to do Shabbos prohibited activity for the sake of the chola. Okay, that's one thing. And the second thing is a Jew is allowed to violate a rabbinic prohibition with a shinui in some abnormal way for the sake of the chola. Either one of those are acceptable. So that applies not only to the exact medical needs of the chola, but I think it's fair to say that that applies to all issues relating to the comfort of the chola. So, you know, I'm sure you can imagine in my line of work, I definitely get phone calls on Friday afternoon. Oy vey, someone's in the hospital. What's the general rule of thumb? The general rule of thumb that I tell people is you may explicitly ask any of the non-Jewish staff to do anything relating to the comfort of the patient, anything, to the comfort of the care of the patient. So with that in mind, let's go to some questions that came up. Question number 1, if someone is in the hospital on Shabbos with an IV plugged in, what should the person do if he or she wants to go for a walk and has to unplug the IV? Now, of course, you know, when you unplug the IV, there's 17 lights, 18 beeps. Definitely seems to be something you're not supposed to do on Shabbos, right? I would agree that if at all possible, the standard halacha would be that the patient should not be unplugging the IV on Shabbos. But what should be fine is to explicitly ask the staff to unplug the IV on the patient's behalf. Certainly being able to go for a walk is certainly part and parcel of the general care and general holistic experience of the patient over Shabbos. Now, let me ask the question that I'm sure some of you are wondering as a follow-up question, because we all know that in the best of hospitals, the nurses are all there when we don't want anything, but when we need something, they're nowhere to be found. I mean, that seems to be the common thing. And of course, that's what those call buttons are for. And that's fine and well during the week. But the problem is on Shabbos, where presumably we can't press the call button on Shabbos. So we need the nurse to unplug the IV for us, or we need the nurse to adjust the bed for us, or all kinds of things but where is the nurse? And it's not the nurse's fault. There's not a one-to-one nurse-to-patient ratio on the floor. What are we supposed to do? So for that, I would remind you of the second halacha that we mentioned. And the second halacha that we mentioned is if something is rabbinically prohibited, it's all right for a Jew to do it with a shinui. So I'll tell you, it's a little bit hard to know sometimes what's rabbinic and what's Torah level, but I'll tell you that those, in my understanding, those call buttons in the hospital, it will be a rabbinic prohibition to push it on Shabbos, which means that if the patient can push it with a shinui, as long as it's for the care of the patient, this certainly is, it's acceptable to do it. What would a shinui be? A shinui, so one shinui would be like do it with your elbow or something like that, but that's easier said than done. But I'll tell you a shinui I picked up a while ago that I think is extremely practical is that if it's something that normally you poke with your finger, like a call button, right? The normal way to do the call button is you poke it with your index finger. So if you poke it with something other than your finger, so if you take a fork, if you take, let's say a fork, if the only thing you had around was a pen or something, that would be okay too. If you take a fork and you poke the button, that's called a shinui. Doing it with your hand. So I would say that if the nurse is nowhere to be found, it's all right to press the call button, as long as it has to do with the care of the patient. Press the call button, like with the fork or something like that. Now, the follow-up question that many people ask me to that is this halacha only for the patient? What about a loved one who's with the patient over Shabbos? In other words, is this only allowance for the patient to do for the patient's behalf? What if a relative, what if a friend is doing it for the patient's behalf? So I think it's all the same. As long as for the care of the patient, it should really, really be fine to press the call button with a shinui. Okay. Obviously, by the way, if there's someone there, it probably would be better for that person to just walk out into the hall and just see if a nurse is around. But if for some reason that was difficult, or the person didn't want to leave the patient, or the nurses already told the people 5 times, leave us alone, just press the button, whatever it is. So then this would be a reasonable thing to do. Okay, so that's one question. The follow-up question is all too real. The follow-up question is, what should someone do if a hospital staff member offers to call in your food order? And it's obvious from the name, the conversation, that this staff member is obviously Jewish. Here it is. I'm talking to you about asking a hospital staff member to do something on your behalf. Sounds like a great idea. Just ask the hospital staff member to do something on your behalf. No problem. She comes in, she introduces herself as Sarah Katz from the Bronx, and she plays Jewish geography with you for the first 15 minutes. And then she says, oh, do you need me to call down your meal for you? I know you're Shabbos observant, but I'm not. What should you do in that situation? What should you do? So I just as an aside, Baruch Hashem, more than one of our children, we were in the hospital for their birth over Shabbos, and nurse came in. There was something we needed to have done. I very wisely told my wife, I'm the rabbi here. I told my wife, well, we can ask the nurse explicitly. It's no problem. It's no issue. My very wise wife said to me, how do we know she's not Jewish? She looks kind of Jewish to me. I said, it's not our problem. The odds are she's not Jewish. And I do feel that it's not, I don't think a person has a responsibility to, start doing research and ask 25 questions to find out if they're Jewish or not. I think you can still assume that they're not Jewish. And then 5 minutes after she does the thing for us, she starts schmoozing with us and she says, I understand I had to do it for you because you're Sabbath observant. That's so meaningful for me because I'm also Jewish. Can you explain more to me? So of course, despite the pains of labor, my wife was still able to give me and I told you so. Look, Baruch Hashem. So it certainly happens. So what's a person supposed to do? The Jewish not Shabbos observant nurse, let's do it. Let's ask both things. Offers to call on your behalf. So I don't know. I don't know if I've got a good idea about how to navigate this, but the bottom line is, if they offer to call, theoretically the best thing is to decline. Hopefully you can decline in a polite way. I don't know. I mean, I don't know if this would work or not. I mean, off the cuff, I would imagine something like, I'll tell you, I'm Shabbos observant, and I know in your own personal life you don't observe the Shabbos, but it would mean, as a Jew, as another Jew, it just means so much to me that we should have the Shabbos together, something like that. But it would not be correct to have a Jewish staff member call on your behalf. What's more likely, I think, the case is a person didn't even realize what was happening, or didn't realize the person was Jewish, like in the scenario that I shared a few minutes ago, and you only realize afterwards. Are you allowed to benefit from the thing? Are you not allowed to benefit from the thing? So the bottom line is, I think you'd be very hard pressed to come up with a scenario that after the fact you weren't allowed to benefit from it. It's not like she made the food just now. If a Jew would make the food on Shabbos, it would be a problem to benefit from the food. But it's not like she made the food. She called someone and the food came up. So it's not like you wouldn't be able to eat the food because she called someone. Now, you shouldn't have her making the phone call for you. But if it happened, if she did it, I don't think there's any prohibitions on that after the fact. Without going into all the details, I think you'd be very hard pressed to find an example if you realized after the fact that the staff member was Jewish. I think you'd be hard pressed to find an example of something that now you have to turn over on its ear. Because of the relatively brief number of questions, what I'd actually like to do is I'd like to open it up for hospital-related questions now. There's some questions in the chat. Hospital on Shabbos or Yom Tov. We'll open it up for questions, and then we'll go on to the next topic after that. Hold on. Okay, this is a very interesting question. So I said that when it comes to being a patient in a hospital, one can assume that a person has halachic status as being a chola, as being a sick person. The question that was submitted is, what about in a nursing home or a rehab center? I think it's fair to assume that in a nursing home or a rehab center, if a person is a resident there, that they have status as a chola, and they could explicitly ask non-Jews to do malach on their behalf on Shabbos. I wouldn't assume that for a high level, a low level of need of an assisted living. I wouldn't assume that for a low level need assisted living, but like a hospital, nursing home, rehab center, I would certainly assume the person has status of chola. And on certain assisted livings, I think you could also assume the person has status as a chola. Oh, that's an interesting question. Thank you for that. So someone submitted, let's say the nurse is calling for a whole list of people, right? So if the nurse is calling for a whole list of people, the Jewish nurse is calling, if I understood correctly, the Jewish nurse is calling for a whole list of people. Is it all right to also have them include your patient's request on that? I still think it will be an issue. It's a great question, but I still think it will be a problem because you're playing a direct role in the person doing a Shabbos prohibition. I think it's an interesting question. Thank you very much. Okay. Automatic doors, great question. How do automatic doors work on Shabbos in a hospital? Okay, so we normally say that if I know that if I step up to the door, the electric eye, whatever it is, will be activated and the door will open, I'm not allowed to do that on Shabbos normally. Okay, so first question, if I'm going to visit a patient on Shabbos, somebody I know is in Holy Cross over Shabbos, I want to walk from Kemil to visit them. So you walk up to Holy Cross, and the first thing before you even get into the building, there are automatic doors, right? So what's the story with that? Is one allowed to walk there? Is one not allowed to walk there? So the standard thing done in that situation is just to sort of linger by the door and wait for someone else to go and use the automatic doors and then come in right behind them. In normal circumstances, there's always somebody. Now, what's more complicated is on a given floor of the hospital, right? So what's more complicated, so what happens? You go to a given floor of the hospital and the door is locked. What do you need to do? You need to press the button and you need to tell them who you are. And then once you tell them who you are, then they'll buzz the door and you can open it. So how are you supposed to do that visiting someone on Shabbos? So I think the ideal thing in that situation is to sort of, again, stand back and wait for someone else. It could be a staff member, it could be another visitor to be coming through. Now, I do not see a problem with assuming the staff member isn't Jewish, and I think you can assume the staff member isn't Jewish, or for that matter, the other visitor. I think you can assume they're not Jewish, unless it's obviously not that way. I think it's fine. This is also for the care of the patient, right? The patient will feel much better if you visit them. I think that's a fair thing to say. So I think it's fine to explicitly say to a staffer walking by or the like, do me a favor, would you mind, it's my Sabbath, I can't press the button. Can I trouble you to press the button for me? I think that would be fine. So I hope I answered the automatic door question. Okay, great question. Food for the person who is there to assist. Meaning as follows. The questioner is making a very correct assumption, but I just want to fill in that blank so we're all on the same page. People ask me this all the time, is the hospital allowed to warm up food for the patient on Shabbos, right? Most hospital food comes warmed up, right? It's double wrapped, it's put in the oven or whatever they warm it in. They double wrap it, they warm it up, and they bring it to you. So what about on Shabbos? Is that a problem? So again, I think we can assume that the hospital staff is not Jewish. They're doing this malacha on Shabbos for the sake of the care of the patient. I think it's fair. I think it's fine. The question is, if you're there visiting the patient and they say to you, this is the 5th day in a row that they brought me the roast beef and mashed potatoes TV dinner. I cannot touch this. You take it. So is there a problem in you partaking of that food? In other words, it's fine that they made it they didn't make it, by the way. It's fine that they warmed it up for the patient on Shabbos, but you're not the patient. Are you allowed to benefit from that food being warmed up? So truth be told, the halacha is the person who's fine is not supposed to benefit from that food being warmed up on Shabbos. Having said that, if the food would be edible either way, that's not really called benefiting. In other words, if the roast beef, if the mashed potatoes would be fine to eat either way, you could eat the mashed potatoes. But probably something like the soup, that if the soup was just room temperature, would really not be very appetizing, probably the soup you should pass on, because the healthy person is not supposed to benefit from the malacha done for the ill person on Shabbos. Okay, that was a great question. Thank you very much. Great question. Thank you, Yitzchak. An ill person needs to go to the hospital on Shabbos. Okay, what's the story with transporting the person to the hospital on Shabbos? So there's two categories. So one is if it's pikuach nefesh, if it's life and death, and if it's even safek pikuach nefesh, if it's even possibly life or death. In that case, whatever needs to be done to get the patient to safety, a Jew can and should do. Having said that, if there's no rush whatsoever, and there's a way to get the patient to the hospital safely before, without a Jew driving, that's appropriate. So for example, I mentioned before, one of our children was born right at the end of Shabbos, and Shabbos morning already, Atara was having very, very drawn out contractions. So we went to the hospital earlier on Shabbos than we would have on a weekday. It was clear to her that this was it, but she probably would have stayed home longer, because we did want it to be that we could just knock on the next door neighbor's, the non-Jewish next door neighbor's door, ask them to call a cab for us, have the cab drive us, and be there in plenty of time. And Baruch Hashem, we were there in plenty of time. Having said that, if there's even the slightest possibility that that's cutting it close, the correct thing in that case is for the husband or whatever other friend or relative to jump in the car and drive the person. That's if it's pikuach nefesh or even safek pikuach nefesh. Let's say the situation is such that this is important. It's important for the care of the patient that it be dealt with on Shabbos, but it's not even indirectly life and death. Let's say a person incurs an injury. Let's say a person incurs an injury, some type of bodily injury, and there's a doctor around. The doctor says, there's no way this is life or death, but you're in terrible pain right now. If you go to the hospital, you'll feel better. They'll be able to set it. They'll be able to give you medication. You'll feel much better if you go to the hospital. But there's no way this is even indirectly life and death. So in that case, the person has status as a chola. And in that case, it would be appropriate to explicitly ask a non-Jew to drive the person, to manipulate the smartphone, to call the Uber, to call the cab, whatever exactly the mechanism would be. It would be fine to explicitly ask them to do so. I must emphasize 20 times over, please, that if there's the slightest doubt, if it's a serious issue, and if time is of the essence, a person should just do whatever they have to do, whether that be picking up the phone and calling the ambulance, if that's considered to be the safest way to go about doing it, whether it be jumping in the car and driving the person themselves. This discussion about asking a non-Jew to make the call is in a very specific circumstance where it's clearly not remotely life and death, and it's also not of an urgency in terms of time. Okay, I want to be very, very clear about that. Now, there's a second end to that question. Person gets to the hospital, and Baruch Hashem, they do whatever needs to be done for the person, and they're doing okay. Thank God they're doing okay. The person was seriously injured, and the hospital set the bone, or rules out whatever was a concern. And now it's 11:30 Shabbos morning, and they discharge you. So now what? So I think it's very fair that anybody who was in the hospital that day, even though they're being discharged, I think it's fair to assume that they have status as a chola, that they have status as a sick person. And by the way, if they don't have status as a sick person, if you make them spend the rest of the day in the lobby, or you make them walk home from Holy Cross, they will become a sick person. I think that's a pretty reasonable rule of thumb. So then again, we revert to what we were talking about before, that it would be absolutely appropriate to ask the hospital staff to operate on the assumption that they're not Jewish, and to ask the hospital staff to please call the hospital, please call a cab, or call an Uber, whatever, on the patient's behalf, and let the patient go home in the car. Now, the next question is relating to that. What about a loved one? May a loved one go in the car together with the patient? In other words, the patient now is on their way home. So I think it's very, very safe to assume that, again, if someone was in the hospital that day, it's appropriate to not leave them alone for the sake of their care. I don't think that's a stretch. Whether it be not leave them alone in the car, heaven forbid, you could imagine terrible situations, by the way, of a woman being alone in a car with a man and doing something, especially if they're vulnerable. But even besides that, even if a man was the patient, I think it makes sense to not leave a man alone, to not leave the patient alone like that. If nothing else, when they get back to the house, are they going to navigate appropriately? So I think it's a decent rule of thumb to assume, in most cases, that a friend or relative could accompany the patient home in the car, in the car being driven by a non-Jew. Now, I'll tell you, years ago, we had one of my kids had a bad injury right before Shabbos. So we drove to the hospital. By the way, this was a classic rookie parents not knowing what in the world they were doing. So it was when we had 2 children. So Yosef, our older one, must have been about 3, and Gedalia, our second, was like a year and a half or something at the time, something like that. And so Yosef got a very bad injury. So we decided that all 4 of us would go to the hospital right before Shabbos. I'm not exactly sure what the thought process was at that one, but in the rush of it, it all made sense. So obviously, it would have made sense for one parent to take the child, to one parent to stay home with the other child. But okay, so then Baruch Hashem, it was dealt with. It was Friday night. To tell my injured child that he has to, hang out in the lobby all Shabbos, that was not reasonable. So we asked the hospital to call. A cab for us. It was from Holy Cross. So Atara went home with the kids, and I walked home. In other words, I didn't have a rationale for me to be in the car. In other words, Atara was there. Atara Baruch Hashem was healthy and well, and she looked after the kids, and I walked home. So I think that's a decent rule of thumb. One accompanier. Thank you. That was a great question. Oh, really interesting question, Ruvain. Thank you very much. Is there an issue with, so I had ask a person to push the automatic door button. Ask a person to push the automatic door button so that you can be let in. But they're asking, who are you? Why are you here? So are you allowed to talk into the thing? Preferably no. Preferably no. Thank you for raising that, Ruvain. Having said that, if you're really stuck, this is probably what to rely on, that you could talk into the thing. But if at all possible, it should be that the kind person who pressed the button for you should explain who you are, if that's at all possible. That's a great question. Thank you for raising that. Okay, so there is a question if the shul still has an arrangement with the cab company. Officially, the shul does still have an arrangement with the cab company. Give me a second as I look in my handy Young Israel Shomer Emunah membership directory, which, if you're fortunate enough to be a member of our shul, could be yours. So let me just find it. I believe we have it in the membership directory. Hold on one second. Sorry, I'm not seeing it in here. Excuse me. I'll tell you in all honesty that it might be intentional even that we don't have it, because I think we have it. I just am trying to find it. Sorry. To be honest with you, practically every time a person calls, the operators don't have the foggiest idea what they're talking about. So I don't know how practical it is to rely on it, to be very honest. The shul officially does still have an arrangement. I'm sorry, I'm not finding it in here. I apologize. Oh, thank you very much. Somebody, whoever, thank you, Menashe Katz. Which company is it, Menashe? Does it say? Regency Cab, thank you very much. Okay, I'm gonna unshare it now, Menashe, okay? Or you can unshare it maybe. Thank you very much, Menashe. Okay, paying the cab driver. Thank you very much, Mrs. Rachel. It's a great question. Paying the cab driver. So if a person knows ahead of time that they're going to the hospital and they have cash, or it's a common question people ask me, they've been in the hospital a few days and it's possible they'll be discharged on Shabbos, how should they handle getting home? So again, I would say they should ask the hospital to call a cab for them, or to use, if they have a smartphone and they have Uber, you could just ask the staff to do the smartphone for you. If you're asking them to call a cab for you, if you know ahead of time, I would have an envelope with the cash in it. I would stick it under a garbage can, and I think $40 for Holy Cross should be reasonable for a cab rate. I think so. Take an envelope, have $40 in it, stick it under the garbage can before Shabbos, and then when the cab drives up, say, I don't handle money on the Sabbath, but if you don't mind, it's the third garbage can over there. Take the envelope, keep the change. Thank you so much. That would be the ideal way to do it. If a person obviously didn't know that was going to be happening, I think it's reasonable to hand them the money for the thing. I wouldn't do with a credit card and this and that, but if there's cash, I think that's reasonable. And you should just ask them to keep the change. Thank you for raising that. Okay, that is such an important question, Mrs. Sperling. I am so glad you raised that. Thank you very much. It is so good to have those, the buttons. I think that's what Mrs. Sperling's talking about, the buttons that a person wears around their neck, particularly for people who live alone. First of all, I want to emphasize it's appropriate to wear those on Shabbos. If a person chas v'shalom had a fall and couldn't get up, they absolutely positively should just press the button. Just press the button and do not do or say a thing differently because it's Shabbos. I can't emphasize enough that anyone who thinks, or maybe family members think it makes sense to own that, please do not hesitate to wear it on Shabbos. I would tell you to wear it outside if there's no Erev up. It's so important, and we all can imagine stories, and unfortunately too many of us know stories of people who chas v'shalom had accidents and just nobody knew. Terrible things could happen. It really can be pikuach nefesh. So I thank you, Mrs. Sperling. That's if just to raise that topic, the whole session was worth it for that. Thank you for raising it. Thank you very much. I hope I answered what you were asking about. Okay. So those were excellent questions. Thank you very much, everybody. I'm going to go on to the list of questions, and if there's time at the end, we'll double back if anyone has additional questions. Okay, there's a question about Band-Aids on Shabbos. So let me just explain what that's talking about. So there's two issues about it. One issue is, of course, we normally don't rip things open on Shabbos, right? We normally don't rip things open on Shabbos. So is it a problem to rip open a Band-Aid on Shabbos? So it's fine to rip open a Band-Aid on Shabbos because presumably there's a reason to have the Band-Aid. It's fine to rip open the Band-Aid on Shabbos. If it's possible to rip it open without tearing the words, you of course should endeavor to do so. But you should not spend an hour trying to rip the Band-Aid open without tearing the words. You should just rip it open, but if you do it without tearing the words, that's what you should try to do. But there's an interesting thing about Band-Aids. I emphasize I'm only saying this if it's feasible. If it's feasible, there's an opinion that says you shouldn't attach the Band-Aid to itself. In other words, when you think about it, if a person has a cut on their finger, so what do? They wrap the Band-Aid around the finger, and the Band-Aid goes around, and the Band-Aid fastens, one end of the Band-Aid fastens up to the other end of the Band-Aid. That's the way we normally put on a Band-Aid. There is a school of thought that says the appropriate way to put on a Band-Aid on Shabbos is not to fasten one end to the other, but to sort of stagger the Band-Aid. In other words, where it's like, sort of like one end is, it's almost like a Band-Aid is a spiral and not a circle. If that makes sense to anybody. Having said that, if it's not going to cover the wound appropriately, or if you're just having a difficult time doing that, it's fine to do the Band-Aid normally. But if at all possible, that would be the story with that. A number of people ask questions about applying creams and the like on Shabbos, creams and lotions on Shabbos. Forgive me, I'm not going to read through each specific question because they're all important questions, but they're all really pointing towards the same issue. So let's just talk this through. It's a malacha on Shabbos to rub a cream into one's hands. That's an issue on Shabbos. It's an issue for cream. It's not an issue for liquid. Okay. Now the $1 million question is what's called liquid and what's called cream. So you get a lot of different opinions about it. So, some people you might see sometimes. I'll tell you what's an easy way to look at it. What's an easy way to look at it is if you turn over the container, does the thing rush downwards? You know what I mean? If you had a bottle of water, a half used bottle of water, and you turned it over, the water would come right down. If you had a half-used bottle of ketchup and you turned it over, the ketchup would slowly creep down. Ketchup's not a liquid. I think we can appreciate that. So it's a decent litmus test. If it basically comes down, maybe that's called liquid. So if you apply that test, many liquid soaps, for example, would pass that test, and most of us are lenient about using liquid soap on Shabbos, but it is something at least to think about. That if you turned it over, it would have come right down, at least with some rapid nature. So, but something that's a cream is really an issue for rubbing on Shabbos. That's one issue. So, just a general cream that one takes for. That's issue number one. Issue number two is if the cream is being taken or the lotion is being taken in a medicinal way. In general, there are issues about medicine on Shabbos. So the normal rule for medicine on Shabbos is as follows. If it's anything that's prescribed, the assumption is or if it's something that you always take proactively, that's that you're not putting it on because you're not feeling well or because your hands are bothering you, that you always take it. So you're allowed to take it on Shabbos. Certainly, if it's something that if you don't apply it, you'll have a setback, you're allowed to take it on Shabbos. Certainly, if it's something that's going to cause you great pain if you don't take it, you're allowed to take it on Shabbos. That covers the medicine issue, but that doesn't cover the rubbing issue. Rubbing is still going to be an issue. To rub a cream into the skin is a problem on Shabbos. So is there any way to apply, if we've decided that it's a lotion that's important to take, is there any way to apply it appropriately on Shabbos? So basically, the standard approach is, and I'll give you the example in the context of a diaper, but you'll understand what we're getting at from the diaper example. So imagine a baby has a diaper rash. So normally what you do is you take your cream or lotion, whatever it is, and you rub it into the baby's skin. But that's an issue on Shabbos. So what's accepted is to put the cream on the surface of the diaper. Now you're not rubbing it into the surface of the diaper. You're just putting the cream on the surface of the diaper. And then you put it on the surface of the diaper and you put the diaper on the child and you press the diaper in very firmly against the skin. You don't start rubbing it back and forth, pressing it back and forth. You just press it on flat against the skin with pressure, and you keep it there for whatever, a minute or two. That's the normal way we deal with that on Shabbos. So, of course, you could do that for all things. If a person has different sensitive medical issues, and either will cause them terrible discomfort or it'll cause a setback, or the doctor said to do it, for all those things that are like creams and lotions. So the idea would be you place it on the surface, maybe a paper towel, maybe something like that, and then press it hard against wherever you're putting it on, but don't rub it back and forth like that. Just press it hard and hold it there. That's the normal recommendation I make to people about creams and lotions. Okay, great question, Ariel. Antiseptic gel. You mean, Ariel, you mean like Purell and the like, I assume that's what you mean. So Yeah, so I think that's liquidous enough to be okay on Shabbos. Thank you for that. I'm sorry, Marsha, I didn't catch lotion. I think I might have missed an earlier chat. If you don't mind resending it, I just see lotion. I don't know the context. I'm sorry. A Vaseline type of medicine, I think would be treated like a cream. That's what I would think. Thank you. Thank you, Ruvain. Question asked as follows. Oh, that's so interesting. Okay. We said you normally don't take medications on Shabbos, right? But again, I emphasize things that are prescriptions, things that a person takes proactively, things that if a person doesn't take it, they'll feel very bad, things that will create setbacks if they don't take it. All those examples, a person should take medications. The question asked is, let's say it's a once a week medication, a pill that a person takes. It's a once a week pill. And they take it on a schedule. It's not a reaction to how they're feeling. Is there any problem with that medication we take it on Shabbos? If that being the 1 day a week, I think it's fine. Thank you for raising it. I think it's an interesting question, but I think that's fine. Any other comments, questions? Any other, thank you again to the people who submitted questions. Any other comments, questions? Okay, let's talk a little bit, Cyrus, a little bit on the shorter end this time, but I think it was still a worthwhile discussion, and thank you to the people who added things. Let's talk for a few minutes about a topic of interest for the next time, God willing. So I think, by the way, just to give people a sense, so the next time we're in July, so the next month is August. And don't tell anybody, but the Yom Tovim are in September. So so I think basically next one will be the last one we'll do until after the Yom Tovim. So one possibility, we could just do, maybe this is too broad. I was thinking maybe just something about the Yom Tovim, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Sukkot. Any questions? But Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Sukkot. It's one possibility. That's one possibility. There were some other possibilities raised. One has to do with being on hotels on Shabbos, one about halachas of davening. But maybe a quick either nod or thumbs up if those who know how to do the symbols, or thumbs down or shake your head. How do people feel about it, like a preemptive one, just general halachas of Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and Sukkot? Any sentiments about that? Okay, so that's what we'll do that. Again, my guess is we'll get a very broad range of questions, but that's okay. You know, we'll God willing, we'll deal with it. Okay, I also, in the interim, someone did submit another question. Is it okay to take headache medicine? Okay, great question. Okay, so here's the scenario. A person feels, a person has had migraine issues in the past, and they feel certain symptoms coming on. They don't have a migraine right now. They feel relatively okay. But from past experience, if they don't take aspirin now, they're going to have a migraine later. May they take aspirin? They're not really sick right now, but if they don't take the aspirin, they will become sick, or they think they might become sick. I think that would be fine. I think that's a great question, but I think that'll be fine. Thank you for raising that. Any other questions? What I thought, whoever wants to get off could certainly feel free to do so, but I thought if we had a few extra minutes, maybe we would just try to hit some of the differences in halacha, since Tisha B'Av is on Sunday. I'll just ask one more thing because someone just put it in. Vitamins on Shabbos, Rav Moshe Fine says in Tshuva, if I remember correctly, that as long as a person takes the vitamins daily, they can take them on Shabbos as well. Thank you for raising that. Okay, so we'll try to go in at least hit the most major points. So first point that's really important to recognize.
What was it that vitamins are mutter?
If a person takes vitamins daily, proactively, and it's not because you're not feeling well, if that's just part of a person's routine, they can take it on Shabbos as well. Yeah. Okay. So first thing that's really important to understand is as of sunset, Shabbos evening, a person's not supposed to eat or drink anymore. In other words, even though it's like another 45 minutes, an hour, whatever it is, until we're actually going to get together and shul for Eicha, as of sunset Shabbos evening, a person's not supposed to eat or drink anymore. Now, even though that's the case, a person is not supposed to overtly do things that show that it's Tisha B'Av until Shabbos is over. So, whatever time sunset is, sunset's probably around like 8:35 or something like that, 8:30, whatever. I don't remember what time it is. But if, let's say sunset's 8:30 Saturday night. So as of 8:30, I can't eat or drink anymore, but I should still sit on a normal seat. And I shouldn't sit low on the ground. And I should still wear regular Shabbos shoes. And so on and so forth. But those other restrictions that are actively proclaiming that's Tisha B'Av, we don't bring in the other restrictions until Shabbos is actually over. Okay, so that's one good thing to keep in mind. The next good thing to keep in mind is on that topic of Shabbos being over. We normally end Shabbos in one of two ways, or I should say, we normally are only allowed to do Shabbos prohibited activities because of one of two things that's already transpired. Either we've davened the Saturday night Mariv with Atocha and Antanu in the Shmona Esrei, or we've heard Havdalah, right? If either one of those things has transpired, we can now do Shabbos prohibited activity once Shabbos is over. So at least for us in Shul, we're going to schedule Mariv after Shabbos is over so that if people don't want to walk in the heat and this and that, they can drive to Shul. So there's two things about that. One is you have to make sure Shabbos is actually over before you get in your car. That's one thing. But the other thing is, if you haven't davened Mariv yet, and we really don't make Havdalah this year Saturday night, we really make Havdalah Sunday night after Tisha B'Av. So if you haven't davened Mariv yet, you should make sure to say Baruch HaMavdu Min Kodesh L'Chol before you do any Shabbos prohibited activity. And by the way, once you say Baruch HaMavdu Min Kodesh L'Chol, if you're going to get in your car, before you get in your car, once you say Baruch HaMavdu Min Kodesh L'Chol, take off your leather shoes and put on Tisha B'Av shoes. Okay, so I hope that's making sense to everybody. Now on the topic of Havdalah, so there's one thing that we do for Havdalah Saturday night. It's not really Havdalah, but we associate it with Havdalah. We make the bracha on the candle. We make the bracha on the candle Saturday night. Okay? Traditionally, we make the bracha on the candle before we read Eicha. The reason for that is in Eicha, we say that God has placed me in darkness. So it's strange after we say that God has placed me in darkness to light a candle. So we traditionally make the bracha on the candle before we read Eicha. We'll make the bracha in Shul Saturday night, God willing, before we read Eicha. But if someone didn't have a chance to see it or whatever it is, they can certainly make the bracha when they come home as well. Okay, now I see someone wrote a question. Is a woman allowed to... Yeah, thank you, Dvorah. That's a good question. There are different opinions about that to begin with. Really, there are opinions either way. There's really varying opinions. Thank you. Okay, so when it comes to Havdalah, the story is as follows. So really Havdalah, in terms of on the cup, we only make that Sunday night. We don't make that Saturday night. We don't make Havdalah Saturday night on a cup because it's a fast day. So we wait for Havdalah until Sunday night. Okay? We make the Havdalah Sunday night. We don't say those psukim at the beginning. We just say Bori Pri Hagafen and the bracha Mavdu Min Kodesh L'Chol, Binor L'Choshech, etc. Okay. So that's the story in terms of that. No b'samim, by the way, at the Sunday night Havdalah. So it's just a bracha on the cup and the bracha of a malta mikosh chobin or lechoshach. Now, the question has been posed. It's a very important question. What if a person's not fasting? What if a person's not fasting? Or what if a person had to break their fast? So if a person's not up to fasting, they should make Havdalah Saturday night, or whenever it is that they're going to break their fast. And if they decide they're going to fast Saturday night, then Sunday morning they're going to break their fast, whatever. Whenever they're breaking their fast, they should make Havdalah. Now, here's a very important halacha. When a person is making the Havdalah Sunday night, they do it on wine or grape juice. If a person is making Havdalah on Tisha B'Av itself, the standard thing to do is not to make it on wine or grape juice, rather on Chamar Medina, rather on some kind of prominent drink, like coffee, tea, orange juice, something like that. I want to repeat it because it's a little bit confusing. In the Sunday night Havdalah, for a person who fasted, it is made on grape juice or wine. But if a person is not fasting, or if a person feels the need to break their fast, the Havdalah on Tisha B'Av itself, person should make Havdalah before breaking the fast, the Havdalah on Tisha B'Av itself is on Chamar Medina, is on a prominent drink. That is coffee, tea, grape juice. I'm sorry. Coffee, tea, orange juice, for example. Okay. Dvora, I'm just, in terms of your specific question, I would pass. Okay, I hope that was clear. Okay. Great question. We do not make the bracha of Besamim Saturday night of Tisha B'Av. Okay? So if a person is not fasting, the Saturday night Havdalah would be on orange juice, for example, with a candle, but no Besamim. And if a person is fasting, the Sunday night Havdalah would be on wine or grape juice, and then Hamav de Mikosh L'Chobin or L'Choshech, etc., but without the psukim at the beginning. I want to emphasize one thing, and this is very important. What I mean when I talk about Havdalah for a person who's not fasting, that before breaking the fast, the person should make Havdalah, that is the halacha. But if a person was fasting, and I'll give you an example, a pregnant woman all of a sudden starts having early contractions because she's fasting, she should drink water immediately, okay? She should not find the sitter for Havdalah, right? She should drink water immediately, and a lot of it. Now, once she's, thank God, gotten herself back to an okay place, and now she's going to eat or drink normally because she's already broke her fast anyway, so she should make Havdalah before she eats or drinks further. But if a person's not well, and that's why they're breaking their fast, they should just break their fast, on water or whatever. Okay, that is a really, really, really good question. That is a really good question. The person who asked me the Abba's iPad, I'm not going to explain the question because I'm worried I'm going to confuse people. But I'm just going to answer your question. If it was a man Saturday night, I would say then Havdalah is covered for the household. I hope that's clear. Okay. I'm just sorry if I would explain the question. I'd lose everybody, I think. Okay. Any other? I think that's it. I think those are all the differences, to the best of my recollection. Any other questions, comments? Okay. Everybody should have a very meaningful fast, and thank you so much for joining us. We're going to have to figure out, Miriam, because I'm actually going on vacation in August, God willing. So,
Rabbi?
Yes.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to ask one more question.
Sure.
Some of us wear jewelry on Shabbos. Should we remove that also when changing our shoes for Tisha B'Av?
You mean once Shabbos is over?
Correct.
You should only change the shoes. Yeah, I think it makes sense. Yeah.
Jewelry also.
I think so. But again, only once Shabbos is over.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
That's not a halacha. That's more sensitivity. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you. In terms of date, everybody, I mean, tentatively, maybe we could talk about this for a second. You know what? Let's say the 24th, August 24th, God willing. That is, well, I don't know. Let me ask you all the question. Rosh Hashanah's on September 6th. Rosh Hashanah is the night of September 6th. Should we do Tuesday, August 24th or Tuesday, August 31st? Any thoughts?
24th.
I think the 24th. There's probably open schools and this and that on the 31st already. Let's go for the 24th. Let's go for the 24th. Okay. Okay. I don't know what time it'll be. It'll depend on what Mincha Marv. Well, God willing, we'll figure that out close to the time. Okay. Stay posted. Thank you very much, everybody. But God willing, August 24th, Tuesday, August 24th. Okay. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.
A good and meaningful fast,
Thank
everybody.
you.
All the best. Bye-bye.